Hi, Old Fuzzface here. Let's pick up where I left off in my video, Sourdough Bread for a Practical Man. There, I made two simple statements. Give me a good loaf of crusty bread. Okay, if you can't give me what I want, then I'll make it myself. That's just what I've been doing since April 12th, 2023. But I couldn't have made that first loaf of bread without Mrs. Patmore, my sourdough starter. Sourdough baking has become popular, but people find the whole starter process mysterious and intimidating. Since I'm a practical man, I had to break through the mystery, find the simple truth, and build my confidence. A year ago, I did just that. I'm going to walk you through what I've learned are the essentials of creating and maintaining a healthy sourdough starter. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what you need to do to get your sourdough starter up and running. So what's a sourdough starter? Answering this question is as simple or as complex as you want to make it. For over 50 years, I worked as a research analyst. The last 14 years of my career, I worked in a national laboratory. I'm familiar with scientific methods, and I have read peer-reviewed papers on sourdough starters. But I'm a practical man. I just want to make a good loaf of bread. So, all you really need to know is, a sourdough starter is a mixture of flour and water that has been fermented by naturally occurring wild yeast and lactic acid bacteria. It serves as a natural leavening agent in bread baking, providing flavor, texture, and rise to the dough. January and February of 2023 were very sad days here at the Serendipity Farmhouse test kitchen. Chef Blondie and I attempted making our own sourdough starter from scratch. But our little old farmhouse is poorly and unevenly heated. We found that starting a sourdough culture wasn't really going to work until we could control the temperature better. So, we bought a San Francisco sourdough-style starter culture made by Cultures for Health. Folks, the bottom line is, there are many ways to get your own sourdough starter. If you're a practical person like me, and you don't have time to waste, call up one of your friends or go to a health food store and get what you need. We began making the starter on March 28th. We followed the instructions precisely. By April 11th, we had sourdough starter mature enough to make this loaf of bread. It wasn't very pretty, to be sure, but the loaf was tasty. Since that day, Mrs. Patmore has served us faithfully. We have shared her with several friends. She's a great companion in the kitchen. Here's the basic feeding and maintenance cycle I use with Mrs. Patmore and my master sourdough bread recipe when I'm baking only one loaf per week. First, on the day when the dough is to be prepared, remove the starter from the refrigerator. At this point, there is usually less than a cup of starter in the container. When we get to step 5, you'll find out that this starter was fed just before it was stored in the refrigerator. So, once the starter gets to room temperature, it will reactivate and begin to grow in volume. 2 or 3 hours prior to preparing the dough, feed the starter with a 1/4 cup of flour and about the same amount of filtered water. Now that Mrs. Patmore is warm and fed, she's really going to get to work. By the time you're ready to prepare your bread dough, your starter should be full of big bubbles. It should smell milky sweet and slightly sour. Now you have a vibrant starter. If you remember that scientific paper I showed you earlier, it not only goes deep into the science of sourdough starters, it also explores the real-life practical experience of bakers. This graphic by Adam Veach, as simplistic and unscientific as it may seem, is a reliable way to illustrate the maturity of sourdough starters. Soon after using your starter, refresh the starter. That is, feed it as you did earlier in step 3. Step 5. Return the starter to the refrigerator and store until your next baking day. If you are a more casual sourdough baker like me, you can keep your starter in the fridge. If you do, you should feed it once a week. Then, on the day before you want to bake, give it 1 or 2 feedings at room temperature before using it to bake. Okay, I've only scratched the surface of what one can learn about sourdough starters. But you should have enough information now to break through that barrier that's been keeping you from baking your own great-tasting sourdough bread. In the future, I intend to put out several videos with practical tips on what I've learned are the essentials of creating and maintaining a healthy sourdough starter. Here are some of the topics we can discuss: flour types, hydration, temperature control, optimal feeding frequency, feeding ratios, and understanding the role of microorganisms. I'm looking forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. So, until next time, follow the resource links in the description box below, hit the like button, and subscribe to our channel. Remember, keep it simple, keep it practical, and happy cooking.